The review called out for meaningful change. I think they're finding it hard to accept that meaningful change will happen when the main players at Red Tractor are still the same as they have been for a number of years. I mean, that's putting it quite strongly, but that's what people feel.
A former NFU Combinable Crops chairman says cereal growers won't be happy until the Red Tractor Farm Assurance Scheme is put right. Cross-border bluetongue restrictions threaten to cause havoc in Wales, and we visit the Royal Highland Show for a beefy announcement. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh. Broom.
And straight to our top story. As you've just heard, a former NFU Combinable Crops chairman says the Red Tractor Farm Assurance Scheme isn't moving fast enough to put things right for farmers. Hertfordshire grower Andrew Watts spoke to us here on the Farmers Weekly podcast just days before an NFU council meeting. Farmers won't be happy until recommendations made by two key independent reviews are properly implemented, he said.
I think that the review itself produced a number of recommendations, which I think generally farmers were very pleased to see. It didn't sort of support everything that farmers were asking for, but it did highlight so many of the issues that have actually been plaguing farmers for a number of years.
And just remind us of one or two of those issues, Andrew.
Well, if you think of how Red Tractor came about in the sort of follow-up to the BSE debacle and so on, there's no doubt that an assurance scheme was needed for the industry. And, the NFU and others quite rightly took that on and were formative in that and working with the retailers to produce something that had some credence. That's great. And I can think of very simple examples in the combinable crop sector, which I'm most familiar with, where there were improvements in grain storage and that were encouraged by the scheme. The challenge for me, or the difficulty I have, is that over the years, there's just been more and more bits added on. And it might sound an odd thing to say, but probably the most single stressful day on the farming calendar was the Red Tractor inspection day, even though we never had any major issues. It just the stress involved around it and making sure that the paperwork and the repetitive paperwork was prepared correctly.
And you're a former NFU Combinable Crops chairman, Andrew. What do arable growers say to you about the situation when they talk to you?
The review called out for meaningful change. Now that's perhaps a slightly wide term, but to me, meaningful change is how I think they're finding it hard to accept that meaningful change will happen when the main players at Red Tractor are still the same as they have been for a number of years. I mean, that's putting it quite strongly, but that's what people feel.
So the people in charge then, Andrew, at Red Tractor, are they able to implement these changes, these recommendations? Are they the right people to do that as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think that's probably the question, Johann, you've asked it. I mean, to me, the report called for a new Broom to go through and make a real good sweep at it and make a fresh start to retain the good and clear away the excesses. But I just question whether the people that are there that have been part of the process for a number of years and have actually allowed and indeed driven the current situation to be reached, are they going to be able to bring about this change and rebuild confidence with growers in Red Tractor? We need an assurance scheme, Johann, let's make no mistake about that. But what we need is one that's proportionate and fit for purpose, not one that's just riddled with petty rules and regulations. And farmers just don't feel, they feel that there are dual standards within the supply chain, particularly with regard to imports. And, they want to feel that Red Tractor is supporting them.
So you say assurance is important, we need it, but what changes do you want to see so that it works for arable growers?
Well, one thing that I was always very keen on in my time when I was closely involved was the principle of earned recognition. And what by that I mean that there are rules and regulations that might be statutory or come from another place that are followed anyway by farmers. And I think that the red tractor scheme has failed to be part of that earned recognition. Perhaps not entirely their fault, but one questions whether they've driven it hard enough. So that we have a simple system that's easy to understand. We have a system that focuses on crop production and safety in crop production, using the arable, the combinable crop sector as an example. And we don't get tied up in things that are peripheral to that, like employment law and things like that, which have been introduced into red tractor. And why? Those things are already covered elsewhere.
You're questioning whether Red Tractor can change without change at the top of the organisation. There has been one new appointment this week, Andrew. Julian Sturdy, Yorkshire farmer and former Tory MP, appointed as head of the Combinable Crops and Sugar Beet Committee at Red Tractor.
Well, it's an interesting appointment. Obviously, somebody who is perhaps seen to be from the outside. My pleas would be, and one hopes that he has the technical knowledge necessary to lead a sector board and the contacts to work constructively and build relationships in the sector. As I'm sure you're aware, there's already the NFU Crops Board and others in the supply chain are working on a review. Julian Sturdy, I just hope, will support growers and the supply chain as they seek to renew this and see where Red Tractor's place is in this, simplify things rather than add yet more complexity.
You mentioned the NFU. You're no longer NFU Combinable Crops Chairman, Andrew, but you are still on NFU Council, the NFU's ruling body. There is an NFU Council meeting coming up on the 23rd, 24th of June. What is your message going to be to NFU Council members?
The feeling of the NFU Council, and I can say this because it's been minuted, was that this meaningful change that I referred to does need to happen. And I think that NFU Council, in representing farmers and growers, will not be happy unless we see that meaningful change brought about. They won't be happy with something that's a fudge.
As Hertfordshire farmer and former NFU Combinable Crops Chairman, still an NFU Council delegate, Andrew Watts. Now, for its part, Red Tractor says that the organisation has made significant progress in responding to the Campbell, Tickell and Farm Assurance reviews, with key recommendations now actively being adopted. But Louise, Andrew Watts with some calm and measured comments there, expressing what many other arable growers will be thinking too.
Yeah, I don't think that they are seeing the pace of change that they expected to see and wanted to see. And I must say, every time I hear that we're going to do a Red Tractor item on the podcast, whatever it might be about, I just think to myself, oh no, what have they done now? Or maybe more pertinently, what haven't they done? As I said, we're not really seeing the progress or the commitment that we were expecting, and I think that is an issue. I know that we have now got a new chairman of the Combinable Crops and Sugar Beet Board. That's been announced this week. Julian Sturdy, former MP, but he also farms in North Yorkshire. So we'll have to hope that Julian can shake things up a bit and they can, just get a move on, really.
And Hugh, these comments from Andrew Watts coming, just days before an NFU council meeting.
Yeah, I think that, it just reflect, 100% agree with what Louise says. I think there is, the question is why have we not moved anything forward? Everyone's still feeling they're stuck in the same place. And look, it's like blooming Groundhog Day, because I said the same thing about a month or whenever it was 2 months ago. They've gone through the psychodrama of all the Environmental Farm Standard, the Llewellyn Report, the Campbell Tickell Review. We've blown God knows how much of NFU members' money on blooming reviews and things. And then the money's come from somewhere, I don't know where, and then nothing's changed. So there's no momentum, and people are like, what is the point? Get on with it. And it's really frustrating. No one is listening, and they're just banging their heads against the table. Because, I can understand why he's really... And he was very measured there and polite, but I'd imagine, if he wasn't in front of the microphone, he might be less measured and less polite. So I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be, unless Julian Sturdy's going to come in, and particularly with the combinable crops people, because we as a red meat producer, I don't have too much of gripe with it, to be honest. It's fine. It needs tweaking. It needs the techie bits sorting out, so it's easier to get involved, do audits and all that stuff. Okay, and we need assurance. We 100% need it. So I'm not anti-assurance. I absolutely reiterate that. But when you look at the situation that the arable guys are in, we had it at cereals, didn't we, Johann? The panel group that you chaired in the first morning of cereals, and they started talking about import equivalents. And I absolutely get it. I found myself talking about it with a lorry driver this morning. We were talking about, I don't know how we got talking about, he was tipping blend. We got talking about rape meal. And then he was asking about the near nicks, and there's less rape around than I said about near nicks not being used. And I said, but it's all right because you can import it from, Canada or wherever, or Australia, and they can use near nicks, and you can put it through the crush here. It's not a problem. And it's like, yeah, so it is the elephant. There's loads of elephants in the room. Perhaps Julian Sturdy is going to be the master elephant herder and sort it out. And good luck to him, 100% if he can. But it needs some oomph. It needs some impetus. And it needs sorting fast.
Andrew Watts was polite, wasn't he, Louise? Even when talking about the situation, how can the people who have got us to where we are now at Red Tractor, how can they then be the right people to put things right? A valid point?
Well, it's a very good point, isn't it? And I don't know all those team members particularly well or know a great deal about them, but you only have to speak. I mean, it's not just Andrew. Speak to any arable farmer out there and they would have that same concern. They want this to work for them, and that's I think a really important point. So let's hope that they can really shake it up now and get on with it and introduce the changes that are so badly needed, and do it in such a way where farmers feel consulted, feel that they're part of the process, and that everyone then gets the right result.
And Hugh, this idea of import equivalents, port assured grain coming in, imported into the country, being stamped at the port, and it goes into the supply chain, all mixed up with Red Tractor assured grain.
Yeah, it's really, as I say, it's really frustrating for arable producers. The irony is, though, if you think about it, we do need more resolution in the assurance, and the Green Farm Standard potentially touched on that, because if you could say, well, this product, this wheat or this barley or whatever it is, arable commodity that I'm producing, it ticks all these boxes in terms of its emissions. For some supply chains, they will buy into that and they may pay a premium. So the reality is we just need this to work. And as we need it to work faster. We need farmers to actually feel that this assurance is a really positive tool for their business. It's a real asset for their business. It's something that they can work with going forward to build their business. And at the moment, none of that is there. So that is the challenge that they face. It's about feeling part of it, owning it, and driving the agenda and driving it forward so it works for everyone across the piece, across the supply chain. And at the moment, they just feel it's very one-sided, and it's not. So there's loads of opportunity there. There's a really good system there. We just need to get on and optimize it.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, bluetongue restrictions on livestock moving from England to Wales will have a devastating impact, say industry leaders. Cattle, sheep and goats will need to test negative for the disease from the 1st of July before they can cross the border into Wales. Hugh caught up with Rob Lewis, chairman of the NFU Cymru Livestock Board.
What they've done, in fact, Hugh, is created a hard border between England and Wales. But obviously, there's no sort of physical border as such, just marked on the maps. They created a lot more uncertainty, a lot more upset, anxiety within the farming industry, and not just for farmers as well, Hugh. It concerns people like auctioneers. We have 550 cross-border farms between England and Wales, and of course a lot of border markets as well, like Hereford, Ludlow, Oswestry, Welshpool, just to name a few. And so it's created a lot of anxiety going forward with the sheep breeding season and sales starting now in the next months.
And what do you think why the Welsh government have taken this stance? I mean, the practical thing would have been presumably to extend the whole of the England zone and make it an England and Welsh zone. What do you think they're trying to prove?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I can see in one sense they've always said they want to keep the disease out of Wales. Now, as we all know, the disease is carried by midges, and it's not not carried by sheep or cattle or anything else. So it's a midge-borne disease. So it's very, very difficult to keep the midges out. They're not going to realise where the border between England and Wales is. And if it was an animal transmissible disease, then it's a different kettle of fish. But as it stands, as I understand at the moment, we've only had 2 cases in Wales, and they were imported cases. So we really haven't seen a homegrown cases yet. I don't think they'll be too far away. But England bringing Defra bringing the whole of England into a red zone, which I can well understand why they've done it, because of the testing capacity and perb rate and so forth. The more it spreads westwards, the more you get into more livestock density areas. So I can see why for ease of practicalities of moving stock from farm to farm and farm to market would be that much easier. So I can see the Welsh government want to keep the disease out of Wales, but I think it's only going to be a matter of time before they might have to review the situation again.
And in terms of the rule book as it stands at the moment, if you're a Welsh farmer trying to bring, say, for example, buy breeding sheep in England and bring them home to Wales, it's not impossible, but presumably it's cost prohibitive.
It is very costly. If they want to bring sheep back into Wales, they've got to test, as it is from today or tomorrow, I believe the 20th of June. All testing is going to be met by the farmer. There's no funded testing, and that could be in the region up to £70 per animal. So that makes it financially unviable to do. And not only that, because they're advocating the use of vaccination, they're not even allowing vaccinated stock into Wales as well. So that's added another worry to farmers why we should need to vaccinate when we still can't even move them into Wales then, So there's a lot of questions to be answered yet, and it's very frustrating, really.
That's Rob Lewis, chairman of the NFU Cymru Livestock Board. Hugh, frustrated Welsh farmers, but since that interview you did with Rob, the Welsh Assembly government has backtracked a little bit on this blue tongue situation in Wales.
Yeah, a bit of common sense has prevailed. It's probably not as good as saying, the same as England, Wales, and all going into one zone. But what they have said now is that if you have a fully vaccinated with Bivalto 3 vaccine, the Boehringer vaccine, if a cow, a bovine, is fully vaccinated, that doesn't need a pre-movement test. So for example, anyone taking cattle into Wales, if they're all vaccinated, no clinical symptoms, and they've still got to apply for the movement licence, then they can move in. But it's no help still, though, to sheep producers or people, say, farming sheep in Wales that would like to buy breeding stock from across the border in Herefordshire. They would still have to pre-movement test all of those sheep, which would cost an absolute fortune at £70 a sheep, and then get the animals in. So it's still not good for sheep, but slightly better for cows, basically.
We still haven't seen much of this and much of blue tongue on the ground in Wales, though.
Look, we haven't seen much on the ground that's been reported. No, I said that's been reported anywhere, to be honest. And I think it's possibly several reasons. So I think probably in the east, there'll be a lot of immune animals that have probably had it rumble through either at low level, back in the spring, winter, or last autumn. In the west, it probably isn't really, it's probably only just starting to circulate, would be my guess. Look, I'm no scientist, but what we do know is that you need to have, plus 14 degrees average, 12 to 14 degrees average for the virus to actually start replicating and circulating. And if you think about it, whilst we've had some dry weather, in the east, we had some really cold winds during the day and we had very cold winds at night, or cold at night. So it hasn't really got fully cooking. With the heat we're getting now, I would think if it's going to show its face, it's going to show its face pretty soon, you would think. So it's going to be interesting. So I think to say, we haven't seen anything, don't worry, guys, everyone stand down, it's probably a bit naive. The continent hasn't seen anything, but then you could argue, or seen much, you could argue that there hasn't been much clinical disease in the continent because they're so fully vaccinated. I mean, they went mad vaccinating last year, and obviously vaccinated into this season. We've only just started to get the vaccine rolled out here. The most uptake, not surprisingly, seems to be in England, followed by Scotland and Wales, where it's still relatively low in terms of the uptake.
So, Hugh, there are a couple of things that I just wanted to understand a bit more about. One is these pre-movement tests, which I think have a cost attached to them, and I think the farmer has to bear that cost. And then the other query that I've got is what's going to happen if blue tongue just suddenly bubbles up in Wales anyway? I mean, are they going to change this policy? If that hard border turns out to be surplus to requirements, what's that mean? Because at the moment, this whole thing is very disruptive and very costly, isn't it?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. So the cost of doing the pre-movement testing is privately, it's about 60 to 70 quid a sample to have it analysed. So imagine if you're trying to, buy 500 breeding ewes or 1,000 breeding ewes from England and bring them into Wales. You're just not going to do it. It's a non-starter. We've been very fortunate on the English side through the winter, and a lot of the pre-movement testing that we've had to do in certification, Defra or APHA have paid for it. But clearly they're seeing that that's actually pretty pointless now because it's going to spread everywhere, which is why we're going to an all-England zone as of the 1st of July. But you're right as well, Louise. If it suddenly appears in the middle of Wales on a hill in the next couple of weeks, in some ways that will have done a lot of the Welsh producers, whilst it sounds weird, it will actually have done them a bit of a favour, because there's then no point having these crazy restrictions in place. They'd be better off just get everyone to vaccinate and just get on with it. It's just going to be a fact of life, and we just keep monitoring it. That's what everyone else has done. That's what Europe's done. So to put these draconian, it's just like taking perfect textbook, theoretical, epidemiological theory from the lecture theatre and applying it in the real world, and it never works that way. So I'm not quite sure why the chief vet has come to the conclusion that it has, but that's their prerogative as the devolved nation to be able to do that.
And Hugh, I guess with things like the Royal Welsh Show coming up and other agricultural shows, this is going to limit entries in the livestock classes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all a lot of talk in livestock showing circles, because there will be, the Royal Welsh, before the Welsh government turned around whenever it was earlier this week and said nothing's coming in from England after the 1st of July, once we go to the All England zone. Before the Welsh government had said that, the Royal Welsh, a day or two before, said they weren't going to accept any cattle entries from England. So they almost like preempted the Welsh government announcement, which I think has made some of the cattle keepers and people with show cattle that would normally go to the Royal Welsh in England possibly might be a bit cross about that, particularly if they've gone to the effort of fully vaccinating their animals and getting everything up together. So on the cattle front, it may be, we'll have to wait and see. Whilst we record this, they may be pushing something out. They may review their situation over the weekend. But the Royal Welsh, you never know. Now the Welsh government says it's all right to bring a vaccinated cow into Wales. The Royal Welsh Show might do that. They're going to have some pretty depleted cattle lines, probably, if they don't. The sheep, though, are a different matter, because obviously the reason the cow and the sheep vaccine thing is different is because that Bivalto vaccine in cows is pretty bomb-proof. It produces some amazing antibody response, and it seems to be providing some pretty rock-solid protection. Not the case, fully proven yet, with the sheep. Now, that may come in time, but certainly the data on the ground suggests that it's not as robust in sheep as it is in cows. But back to the show thing, there will probably still not be much in the way of sheep coming from England into the Welsh sheep lines unless things change. Or, as we said earlier with Louise, if Wales has a case or two suddenly appear, then that would change the situation. But the flip side of that as well is that you're effectively, by not sort of opening everything up and being open, you could argue, does it drive it underground a bit more as well, and people are less likely to report it? So there's that going on as well. But it certainly will upset not just the Royal Welsh Show, but any other Welsh shows that rely on English entries.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can also message us by texting the word farm, followed by your message to 88440. Louise, messages this week?
Yeah, I've had some messages this week, and I think you might enjoy this one, Hugh. But a number of people commenting on the fact that on last week's podcast, you said that you were stunned into silence by the skylarks, and then you admitted that was a rare thing for you. So they all enjoyed that one. And
the skylarks were pretty impressive, though. I was talking to someone today about them. I still can't get over how amazing the Lincolnshire Skylark group is. It's like every skylark flew to the cereals event. The noise level was unbelievable, amazing.
They're incredible, aren't they? Territorial birds, so of course they do make a lot of noise, guarding their patch, so to speak. Incredible. And the other messages actually that I've had, it hasn't all been about Hugh this week. The other messages have just been this recognition, I think, for the oak variety Mascani, because people are really pleased to see it win that cup and, get that reward. And as we said at the time, against everything else that's going on with varieties and cereal varieties at the moment, the fact that that one's there for 21 years and is still going very strong indeed, they think that's a really nice thing, good thing.
Now, other news this week, we were expecting a clampdown on muck spreading, manure and muck spreading in the autumn, but Louise, a sigh of relief, as it were, on the farming rules for water.
Yeah, I mean, there has been some news. It's a little bit difficult to work out what it is. But, in a nutshell, we were expecting, I think, some stricter interpretation of the farming rules for water. But for right now, that doesn't seem to be the case. So the Environment Agency is going to prioritise the advice and guidance approach that it has taken up to now. So I think that's a good thing. I think, we've got to make good use of the expert guidance, whether that's RB 209, the fertiliser manual, or your FACTS qualified agronomist. And we've got to make sure that we don't exceed the needs of the soil and the crop with any muck or digestate that's being applied. So, there has been a tightening up of the wording in places. So I think we need to just watch out for that. But this does mean that farmers can continue to work together and with the authorities to prevent any problems that happen and just push through with this best practice, really. I think, again, we used the word sigh of relief last week, and I think this is a sigh of relief on this one. The only watch point for now is, will it become a bit of a postcode lottery? Because the Environment Agency are going to enforce these rules now. So possibly they'll be tougher in some areas than others, but we'll just have to see on that.
And I suppose the key thing, Louise, you said about, it could be a postcode lottery. It's not as draconian as some of might have thought. But I suppose the flip side as well is, do we need to get better at knowing what's going on our farms? I mean, we have a little very basic phosphate kit for testing water quality, and we keep an eye on that. Do we need to get, create a more dynamic thing so we actually know what we're looking at and what we're targeting?
I'm sure that would be useful and that would be helpful, Hugh. I mean, proactive is right. Everyone's got to do what they can, really. I mean, nobody sets out, do they, to pollute water? So sometimes these are genuine mistakes or accidents. But if you can have the proof show that it's not what you're doing on your farm that is causing problems. And I know that has happened in the past. I mean, there's a group of farmers down in Wiltshire who have been testing along the River Wylye, I think it is, and they've been able to show that the pollution is coming from another source and not from the farm. So, that's really useful stuff. And that will help generally clean up our water, which is something that I think we all want to be involved with.
Yeah, as the old adage, the old cliche goes, you've got to measure it to manage it. Hugh, the markets, how are they measuring up this week?
Thank you very much, Johann. Finished steer deadweight this week, 642.3, drops back 10p on the week this week, 652.8 last week. Live weight 357.8. That's back exactly a penny on the week. There is some heat though coming into the lamb market. SQQ dead weight this week 724.2. That has crept up about 8 or 9p on the week. And actually, if you speak to people on the ground bidding on lambs today, it's slightly higher than that as well. So there is some demand for sheep. Live weight SQQ 359 dead, up from 351.7 last week. Pigs stand on at 207.2. That's the SPP, average dead weight for pigs. Arable markets, there's little lifts in places, but little downfalls in other places. Feed wheat, I'm afraid, 160, 60, 160 pounds, 60p. That's actually gone up almost, or just under. It's gone up £2.90 on the week. Milling wheat, 183. That's actually gone up a fiver on the week. Feed barley, though, I'm afraid, drops back £4. Great if you're feeding. Bad if you're growing. Oilseed rape also goes back £3, 425.7 this week. Feed peas also dropped back to 11.1, and feed beans pretty much stand on 225.30 this week. Not surprisingly, the price of a litre of red diesel, given what is currently happening in the Middle East, has gone up. You've added, if you didn't buy last week, you'll be paying on average probably an extra 6 or 7p a litre this week. Wednesday morning ring round this week, 69.63 pence per litre. That is up from 63.38 last week. But hey, bear in mind, though, a year ago, it was actually higher at 73.2. So let's hope there's no more silly. Well, things calm down and it stays around 69 or under 70. But I shouldn't hold your breath.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, last but by no means least, it's mid-June, which means it's time for the Royal Highland Show, the showcase for everything good about Scottish food and farming. Farmers Weekly's Phil Case went along and caught up with some of the exhibitors in the livestock lines.
I'm Katie Aiken and I farm in Ainstable. We farm pedigree sheep, which consists of Texels, Bell Texes, Border Leicesters and Blue Texels, and some commercials. And we also farm beef cows as well. That's what we do, yeah.
And what do you think about this year's show then?
Well, first day, so it should be all right. Some people can't come from the bluetongue restrictions, so that probably quiets it down a bit, but there's nothing we can do about that. We just have to make it worth as they was here, really. So yeah.
And just finally, is this an opportunity for you to meet some friends as well and have a proper knees up?
Yeah, the Highland Show, I mean, is one of my favourites because all my friends are here, and yeah, proper meet up, proper catch up with friends. You win or lose, you party anyway, so it's a good laugh, yeah.
Ewan Campbell at Crawlaw Farm in Galston. We've got a big team here this week with commercial cattle, Beltley Galways, Cheevies and Texels, so it'll be a busy week. It's a big show of sheep and cattle. There's a lot of good competition out there, so yeah, it's a very good show of stock. So this week's obviously a massive kind of marker in the social calendar, so it's good to catch up with a lot of people you probably haven't seen since probably this time last year, so it's a big social event to catch up with a lot of people, so it'll be good.
And finally, what do you think about the future prospects for farming? Are you hopeful, neutral or negative?
No, definitely hopeful. I mean, there's obviously some challenges coming up, but I think we'll all get through it. We always do, through the hard times, so we should be okay.
That's Phil Case catching up with some of the exhibitors at the Royal Highland Show. And earlier I caught up with Phil myself and asked him how he was finding it.
Well, it's been a really great few days here at the Royal Highland Show. There's been a huge amount of people that have been pouring through the doors, and they've been treated with wonderful displays. There's been a fantastic array of different stalls and, of course, the fantastic food that they've got here in Scotland as well. And the temperature has also been very high. There's been wonderful conditions, but not as hot as it is in England, for example. But there's been a really festival-like atmosphere, you could say, and people have really enjoyed it. The farmers have had a fantastic time here, and a wonderful occasion to meet some old faces and chat about your problems and really have a proper knees up.
And possibly some dancing in the cattle lines at the showground, Phil, following an announcement by Rural Affairs Secretary Mary Goujon.
Yes, so on Thursday morning, Mary Goujon, the Scottish Rural Affairs Secretary, she made an announcement that the Scottish Government under the SNP would not be following the guidance from the Climate Change Committee to reduce livestock numbers by 26 or 27% by 2040 in order to meet net zero obligations. It came as a really great announcement for the livestock industry, which, as we all know, has been under fire over methane emissions from livestock. So this was unexpected, although I have been told that NFU Scotland have been lobbying for this for a number of years. And this has been really greeted warmly by the whole of the livestock farming industry, who feel that they've been under attack for a number of years now. It remains to be seen, however, the impact of the SNP or the ruling SNP statement, because next May there is the Scottish government elections, and there is uncertainty over who will get in, whether Scottish Labour will win power, or whether the SNP will remain in power and maybe under a coalition. But it does remain to be seen what happens. I will say as well that Mary Goujon has stated that she is going to she'll be leaving politics after a decade in a career as an SNP. So it really does remain to be seen what will happen with this policy, but certainly one that's been treated very, very warmly by the farming industry.
And not the only piece of good news coming out of the Royal Highland, Phil.
Yes, so also Mary Goujon announced the opening for applications in mid-July of a new capital grant scheme, which is worth £14 million. Now, this scheme is mainly focused at new entrants and also young farmers, tenant farmers in particular. So it's seen as a way for them to fund projects and certain things on the farm to give them a leg up in the industry. Depending on the size of your farm, you can apply for a grant of £20,000, and this would be distributed at 100% of the rate. So all the details are on the website as well, the Scottish Government's website. So I would say for any young budding farmer or people who are just starting out in particular, get yourselves over to the website, have a look and see if there are any of the options that match your criteria. There's a list of eligible and ineligible options, and the Scottish Government is saying that they want to pay out this money. They want to ensure that every penny of this money is spent. And so it's not only the £14 million this year, there will also be £26 million in capital funding for next year as well. So the advice is to get on and look into the options and see if anything's there for you to look into.
That's Phil Case at the Royal Highland Show. And if you want to know more about that future farming investment scheme, that £14 million scheme due to open in mid-July, simply go to the Scottish Government's Rural Payments and Services website, which is ruralpayments.org. And that is it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've been listening to. If you have, please do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like what you've heard, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the news, views and analysis of all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But for now, until next week, I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening.